So I have lots of violins, but I need a new violin for a specific mission and kind of a new path that my life is taking. And I'll tell you a lot more about that later. But I thought it would be a great idea to take you along the journey of picking out a new violin online and help you know the steps to pick out the perfect violin for you. Now, a few caveats. If you're purchasing a violin, let's say under about $400, you don't necessarily need to know everything that I'm going to tell you here. I have a lot of resources to just help you pick out a good violin and then get started playing. But if you're looking at a violin, let's say about over $1,000, that's considered more of an intermediate or advanced range, then it's really good to understand what I'm going to be talking about today to help you determine which violin is perfect for you. It's also important to point out that you don't have to be an intermediate or advanced player to play on a intermediate or advanced violin. You can absolutely be a beginner playing on an advanced violin. Those terms, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, are really more for price range, more so than ability or ease of playing. Advanced violins are actually usually a little bit easier to play. And last of all, you don't have to have any violin playing skills to be able to determine the differences between really nice violins. For instance, my mother is not a musician, she's not a violinist, and she can always hear the differences in violins and pick out the better violin. So I'm going to give you those skills so that you can do that as well. So I'm going to be using fiddlershop.com. I've had a lot of great experiences with them in the past, and I know they produce really good products. Now, Fiddler Shop has really revolutionized the way you can purchase a violin online. In the old days when I was first starting, if you wanted to purchase a violin online, you just kind of looked at the pictures, picked one or two that you liked, maybe asked them to send them to you for an in-home trial, and then you kind of made a decision between those two violins. Well, Fiddler Shop does something totally different. Anytime a customer is looking at a violin, they can request for a video to be made, and the employee will play one or two or the three of those violins that they're looking at, record that, post it on YouTube, and then that way the customer can really make decisions between a few different violins. Now, all these videos are online and public for all of us to listen to, which means that you can do a lot of research and spend a lot of time listening to different violins and narrowing it down before you ever swipe your credit card. So I'm going to teach you how to hear the differences between different violins. But first, we have to talk a little bit about violin sound production, because we all know you can have two violins that look almost identical but have totally different tonal qualities. So let's talk about why that is. So this is a website called Muted.io, and I love it for demonstrating the overtone series. So anytime you're playing a pitch or a note, you hear one frequency, and that's called the fundamental. But that's not the only frequency that you're hearing. You're hearing lots of additional frequencies over that fundamental. And all of those additional frequencies are called overtones. And that's what gives this complexity and richness to a sound. Now you'll notice all of the overtones occur in a specialized formula. So if you were playing, let's say, an A on a guitar and an A on the violin, all of the same overtones would be there, but they would be happening in different strengths and weaknesses. And if we were actually able to strip away all of the overtones and just hear the fundamental of the guitar and the fundamental of the violin, they would actually sound the exact same. It's those overtones that give us that different quality of sound. And that same concept applies to two identical looking violins that can sound completely different. One of the things that can give a violin different tonal qualities is the strength or weakness of different overtones. So Fiddler Shop provides you with this chart to help you compare the different violins in their Holstein violin line. Now, I don't want you to get really focused on this chart and try to make your decision based solely on this chart. You should use this as a handy guide to help you determine the differences in violins, but always let the sound be the ultimate deciding factor. So I created my own version of this chart, and it still has the main words on it: focused, brilliant, broad, and warm, but I took away all the violins to make it less confusing. And you'll also notice that for each of these terms, I added my own additional term, because if any one of these terms kind of goes too far, it becomes something negative, and we're going to talk about that. So first, let's talk about these 4 broad ways we use to describe violin sound and what each of them mean. So you could have a violin that has a very focused sound. And what that tends to mean is that you don't have as many really audible overtones. The overtones are maybe not as obvious, but you have a really strong fundamental. And what that helps give the violin a kind of laser-like sound. This is really helpful for people who are maybe playing in really big spaces and they want a violin that projects to where that person in row Z can really hear it. Now, if a violin gets a little bit too focused, then it might start to sound a little one-dimensional. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you can have a very broad-sounding violin. And what that tends to mean is that there's a lot of overtones. They're very strong. Each note has many overtones. But the fundamental might be a little weaker than, let's say, a focused violin. So if that goes too far, then you might start to get more of a muddy, unfocused sound. Many violins are often described as being brilliant. That means that, again, there are lots of overtones, but the higher overtones tend to be a little bit stronger. Now, I'm not talking about the higher register of the violin. Whatever note you're playing, remember how it has lower overtones and then the overtones gradually get higher and higher. So whatever note you're playing, those higher overtones tend to be a little bit stronger. And that helps give that violin that brilliant, bright sounding quality. Now, if something sounds too brilliant, it will start to sound maybe a little bit shrill. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have warm. And a warm sound generally has very subtle overtones. They might not be really resonant and ringy and bright. They're a little bit more subtle. And usually the lower overtones are the stronger ones. Now, if you have a violin that gets too warm, it's going to start to sound a little bit muffled. Now, you might think that you want a violin right here, smack dab in the middle. And that's not necessarily exactly what you want. It might be, but it might not be. Because all of these are very subjective terms. We all hear differently and we all pick up on different frequencies, which is why one violin might sound really brilliant to someone and it's going to sound very shrill to someone else. So use these terms to help you make decisions and to help you describe the difference in sound between different violins. But remember, this is all dependent on you and what you want and that perfect sound that's going to be a perfect match for you. So I hope this gives you kind of a general sense of what you're listening for when you're trying to determine between different violins to buy. And in the next video, I'm going to give you some more specific words to use to describe sounds, and I'm going to show you how I can listen to different videos and pick up on these different qualities.